Welcome to our participants. As you are arriving, we're just going to wait a few minutes to let everyone join the Zoom room, and then we will get tonight's program started. All right, let's get started. Welcome. On behalf of the Evanston Public Library, I would like to welcome you to tonight's program, which is part 2 of our series on the legacy of school segregation in Evanston. My name is Heather Norborg. I'm the Lifelong Learning and Literacy Manager at the Evanston Public Library, and I'd like to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to our panelists, both from last week and from tonight, and especially to our student moderators tonight. Tonight's topic is Visions for a Community School in the 5th Ward. And we are joined by 6 students from Evanston Township High School's Emerge Club, who will introduce our panelists and moderate tonight's discussion. So on behalf of the library, I'd like to say welcome and thank you for joining us. And now I'm going to pass the mic over to one of our student moderators, Izzy McDermott.
Hi, I'm Izzy. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a junior at Evanston Township. I'm here because not only have I worked with Henry Wilkins, one of the panelists, for about a year and a half now, but I truly believe that I believe in support in putting a school in the 5th Ward, and I think to do that, we need to teach the community about it so that we can back the school.
Hi, I'm Maya. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a sophomore at UTHS, and like Izzy, I'm here because I think we should be spreading more awareness about the schools. Not many people that I know about it. It's been a problem for 50 years.
Hello, I'm Anna Grant-Bolton. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior at Evanston Township High School. I'm involved in this fight. I've been involved with Izzy for the past year and a half or so. I'm really passionate about educational justice. And the more I learn about the history of the 5th Ward, the more I want to get involved. So I'm going to pass it on to Alice.
Hi, I'm Alice. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a sophomore at ETHS, and I'm here because I think it's really important for us to be raising awareness around this issue so we can really expedite the process of actually getting a school in the 5th Ward. And I think educating the community is a really big step in making that happen.
Hi, I'm Kaya. I'm a sophomore at ETHS, and I use she, her pronouns. And just like the rest of what everybody else has said, I'm here in support of helping build a school in the 5th Ward.
So we're all part of Emerge, which is a leadership and community development program for ETHS students. ETHS students partner with community organizations to implement or sustain a project that addresses the community's needs. Our Emerge project, which focuses on bringing a school to the 5th Ward, was started last year by Emerge students and is being sustained by this current group.
So thank you all for coming. The reason you're here is to learn and understand the community school model and to learn more about how the community school will benefit the kids and the families living in the 5th Ward. The goal of this webinar is to give, the goal of the school is to give the students easier access to equal education by establishing that said school. So again, thank you all for being here to learn more and being a part of this movement.
This school is not only important to the community, but to us personally, because we are committed to making Evanston's public school system more equitable and accessible to Black and Brown students in the 5th Ward. because they bore all the hardships of integration while white students receive all the benefits. And by establishing a school in the Fifth Ward, education will be more readily accessible to historically marginalized kids, and racial disparities in education will reduce.
So before we start, I'd like to remind you all to use the Q&A section to type and send any questions you have throughout this entire program. So first we have Sarita Smith. She's the manager of student assignment in District 65. So Sarita, would you like to get started?
Yes, thank you, Emerge students. I definitely gave them a lot of props behind the scenes, but also publicly. I think it's really, really dope for young bodies, young emerging adults to be leading this process, this project, and racial justice. So thank you guys so much for what you do. As I said, I'm Sarita Smith. I am a manager of student assignments here at District 65. I have been here a very strong 9 months, but I am an Evanston resident. I have 2 students. We are a Walker family and have gone through the whole school system here as well. So this work for me is both very, very personal, but also like I can see a wonderful, bright future for District 65, which is why I joined this team. And I'm happy to work with Henry as we imagine what this would look like for particularly Fifth Ward families, but also taking kind of a global look at our student assignment project as a whole. So I'm going to share my screen and get started. So I'm just gonna start just about what student assignments is. So we often hear kind of decouple boundary lines, redistricting is a word you might hear, and then there's student assignments. So think of student assignments as us aligning our values to community needs. And then for us in the district, bringing an equitable lens to that opportunity for all of our students. So it isn't just about boundary lines. It isn't just, about the Fifth Ward school. It's really kind of encompassing everything that we're thinking about, like how students are assigned, what opportunities we have, what programs we offer, how are our schools broken up by grade. So the whole gamut. So in April, we actually developed our student assignment project committee made up of about 40 different parents, educators, community leaders, union representative, District 65 board members, you name it, we have it because we really want a diverse group and mindsets to really carry out this project. So this group of people, we plan to make recommendations to the board, hopefully next year, which includes but aren't limited to possible new school boundaries, decreasing our District 65 structural deficit, thinking about equitable selection processes for magnet schools and programs, and the obvious one, a school for Fifth Ward families. And then we will be definitely using our work and making sure that it's really defined by data. And so I say this to say that there is a lot of emotion behind this work, rightfully so, but we cannot make decisions in a vacuum, and it cannot only be emotional. We need data behind our decision making that matches the emotion and then pushes the work forward. So in May, at the end of this month, actually, you'll be hearing a lot from our district about a survey for both students, for families, for caregivers, community members, and our staff, really to kind of gauge interest around what kind of options they're looking for, what student assignment possibilities could look like in the future. I also want to take some time to thank Dino and Mary. I think they did a really phenomenal job at setting the stage of the history for this work. I even learned some things, and I've been researching it for 9 months. So I really appreciate us really taking a look and learning some very valuable lessons around regarding desegregation and what was happening in Evanston at that time, and really the impact of our decision making at that time. So just want to give them a quick shout out as well. So maps, I've been looking at a lot of maps this year. And so the map on the left is the 1995 Evanston Skokie School District map. As you see, there's like some scribbles and some scratches. And so it's really important for us to know, or for you guys to know, as a part of that history, that really we are still grounded in a desegregation model even today, and that we haven't really shifted our boundary lines in 26 years. So that's a really long time. And after 1995, we really moved away from shifting our boundary lines to adding programs and services in schools to balance them racially. And so essentially, we're still in this model. We're still kind of doing it that way. And we, at our core, really believe that our community and district is ready to right-size this framework. And it's been in place for 2 decades and make it a better effort and a more equitable way of balancing schools and enrollments. So the question is how has not modernizing the student assignment process cascaded into some of the challenges that we currently have today? And we know we love this district, we love this community, but we have our challenges and it's time to figure those out. So a few things. There's some potential areas of focus that I want to kind of point out to everyone. Based on data and research that we currently have, we know, and the committee is getting some information as we speak, just around that we need to revise some boundary lines. We need to look at them at a minimum and determine if they are still what we need. We really need to think about equitable programs and services, because again, right now we've been putting programs in schools for racial balance reasons, not necessarily because that's where those students live or that's the school that could best serve them. We need to really think about how we're going to decrease our structural deficit. You probably, if you're in the community, has heard several times at this point from Dr. Horton, from our board members, that is a priority of the board. And so the question is, how does the work of this committee and redoing the student assignment plan connect to a structural deficit decreasing? And then addressing fifth ward family inequities. It's been too long, and there's been a lot of good conversation. There's been a lot of documentation about the inequities, and now we believe it's time to put that into action. So potential future, we want you guys to know that this is really going to be community driven. All the outcomes will really be based on surveys that we put out to the Evanston and Skokie families. We are then going to take that information. If we don't understand something, if we need more information, we plan to do focus groups that will be led by Northwestern's faculty. After we get all of the data from that, as well as our master facilities plan, which is also happening right now, which is super great because we'll have some really in-depth information about our schools, where they're located, how much money it takes to support them, how kids can truly fit in a class size. Some really, really great data that we'll be able to use to inform our decisions moving forward, which will be extremely exciting. So we're going to be gathering a lot of data, and a lot of that, especially on the survey end, is going to come from families. After we have all the data that we need, we will probably have some recommendations or some ideas around those focus groups that we plan to actually bring to the community before we bring to the board. I'll say that again because it's a little different. We are going to be brave enough to bring some of our ideas to the community before we bring them to the board, because again, it should be community driven. If there's ideas that the community we thought are great and all the data supports and the community hates, we may have to go back to the drawing board. Now, if there are obviously some things that are not negotiable around finances and things like that, but we really want to be as transparent as possible and really get the community buy-in before we take the decision to the board. So we talked about, and I think even Dina and Mary both talked about the amazingness of a local area school, how the potential of that camaraderie, the community, kids staying after school and playing and get to know their neighbors and not having to get on buses. So the local area school is definitely a pillar of what we need to look at and how to get back to that model versus busing kids throughout the city. And so before we can do that, we have to figure out first why the kids aren't going to local area schools. And so some of the reasons that we have come up with, just based on some information and data we have at the student assignments department, is the first big one is that educational services that students need were not available at their local area schools. And therefore the district had an obligation to support those kids at schools that did offer those services. Permissive transfer for programming like TWE, our two-way immersion program, and ACC, our African-centered curriculum, is another reason kids may not go to a local area school, or like our magnet school programs like King Arts and Bessie Rhodes. Parent requests, we have a good amount of parent requests for various reasons to go to different schools other than their local area schools. And obviously the fourth one that is directly related to Fifth Ward is that they don't have a local area school. So therefore, again, we have to send them to another school. So one way that on the student services end that we're kind of fixing this is expanding special education services. So taking the time to really think about where we place services is really important. Since Dr. De Cristofaro has been here, her and her team have really been hitting the pavement on making sure that special education services are offered at every single school. So inclusion and classroom resources are at all of our District 65 schools. We now have bilingual special education support at our JEH where our babies are, the main district building, all of our two-way all of our two-way emergent sites. So we have 6 of those, and then all of our middle schools. Furthermore, we have specialized programming like STEP at Lincoln, and then those students then go on to Nichols and Rise at King Arts. And then our wonderful schools that we hold at a high regard, Park and Rice, and then we have some therapeutic day school options as well. And we continue to support residential, homebound, and hospitalized students. The other big news from that department, which I'm super excited about and excited to share, because currently we bus a lot of students for emergent bilingual services. And so not just our two-way emergent program, but students who speak any other language than English and need support at their schools. We were not always in a place where we are offering that everywhere. As you can see, this kind of linear progression going on. By 2024, we actually plan to make sure that emergent bilingual services are offered at every school besides Rice at this point. And so that's gonna be huge for student assignments, because we can plan knowing that over time, our transportation needs will decrease for students that have emergent bilingual needs. So offering, just kind of summing that piece up, offering what students need at their local area schools is the goal. This will eliminate the need for massive transportations. It will eliminate the need for a bunch of different kind of permissive transfers, and really create like a true equitable education support and experience for all students. And furthermore, bringing that local area community kind of school feel back to kind of a home base. And so just to kind of draw the lines a little bit. So if we are thinking about modernizing a student assignment plan, again, using data, so data from our master facility plans, data from our family and staff surveys, current data we have that Northwestern has supported getting for us, this will lead us to really truly addressing these inequities for the Fifth Ward families, and also leading us to really offering the support and diverse and for diverse and learners at all of their local area schools, thus decreasing our structural deficit. And I'm going to end with and pass it to Henry with really the significance of the Fifth Ward, because I know that's what kind of this conversation is about. I just wanted to kind of paint the whole picture for you guys. So the red lines on this map on the right are our wards in Edmonton. And then the colorful blocks are our schools. And so you can see that this section here is our Fifth Ward. And currently those students are assigned to 5 different schools in our district. The reality though is that, again, because of EB needs, because of special education needs, because of programs, because parents request, Fifth Ward students actually attend every single school in our district across. So you could imagine what that may look like over the course of time. And we already know that the majority of these students, outside of possibly students that attend Haven for middle school, since that's in walking distance, get bused to whatever their school is, and they have not had a school since 1979. After Foster Building officially closed and was sold, there has not been any movement from on the district end to really make this happen. Henry and I know that we stand on the backs and shoulders of giants that have been trying to push this forward, and we are happily taking this baton and really trying to make sure that this happens this time. And so really taking a time to look at this map in a very empathetic way, and taking maybe yourself out of your own comfort, out of your own spaces a little bit, and out of your own privilege, to really say, like, if those were your kids, would you want that for them? Like, what does this map really say about our values in Evanston and our priorities? And furthermore, I asked on the side, what can we do about it? But I'm hoping that with this information that we've been given to the community, we're truly ready to do something about it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Sarita, that was great. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Henry Wilkins, the man who's been spearheading the movement to get a STEM school in the 5th Ward. So if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm just setting up my presentation. I'll talk while it's being set up. So I'm originally from Ohio. I've been living in the Evanston-Skokie area. Wow, it'll be close to 20 years. But the pursuit actually happened about 3.5 years ago. Actually, we'll jump to this picture here. Let's see, give me a second. Oh. All right, so I assume you guys can see my screen. So the beginning. So it was about 3.5 years ago, if I can get to, oh, it's locked up on me. I'll share it, I'll just talk. So it was about 3.5 years ago, I was at a school board meeting, and like I said, I've been living in Evanston, Skokie for about 15 years, and there were some individuals from the 5th Ward community that stood up during public comments and said, now's the time to open a school in the 5th Ward. We've been wanting a school, and now's the time to do it. And my ears perked up. I was like, what are they talking about? 5th Ward, no school. And I did some research and learned that, in fact, 40, 50 years ago, there was a school called Foster located in the 5th Ward that was closed down. And they, due to desegregation plans, they divided the entire community up, and they sent them and assigned them to several different schools. And Sarita just showed you the map of that. And for me, my heart broke, because I knew that children that don't have a school nearby, it negatively impacts their educational experience. And so I really took this on as, you know, trying to fix something that I, you know, for the children, for the future. And, you know, maybe my children will benefit, maybe they won't. I have 2 kids in the school district. One is in the 5th grade and one is in the 1st grade, and they both attend Walker Elementary School. So with that, let me try this again on this share screen. Let's see. Huh, this is weird. All right. Sorry, guys, I'm gonna stop trying to share. All right, so I talked about the beginning. What I'm going to do for this presentation is just talk about the situation. I'll share with you the vision. I'll explain the vision. I'll share with you the value of opening this STEM community school, and then we can move into some discussion and Q&A. In 1905, Foster had opened its doors. It was a predominantly white school at the time. There were hardly any Blacks that lived in that particular, you know, neighborhood. And then over time, due to redlining practices and, you know, various other racist incidents, the 5th Ward became populated with a lot of Blacks. We're talking 90%, 95% plus. And Foster School was nearly 100% Black. Evanston tried to be progressive at the time and attempted to desegregate the schools. And the way they did it was to close down Foster, which was essentially an all-Black school, and divided all those students up, and they sent them and bused them to several different schools. Dr. Coffin, who was the superintendent at the time, knew that this plan was unfair. He knew that this was a one-way busing program. There wasn't the same expectation as far as you know, whites helping to integrate a Black community. It was the Black community, helping to integrate all the other communities, mostly white communities. So in 1967, Foster School had closed its doors. They made a deal. King Arts Magnet School was created in the Fifth Ward. And that school was essentially for the community members that lived outside the Fifth Ward. So it really wasn't, even though it was located in the Fifth Ward, it really wasn't for Fifth Ward residents. They moved the school out in 1979 and basically left the Fifth Ward void of a public school. Over time, District 65 has done a lot. They've done enrichment programming, they've hired diverse staff, they've improved the curriculum. But despite all that activity over the time, the problems still linger. Students are still bused across the district. There's an achievement gap or opportunity gap, and the community's integrity has been impacted. In terms of the busing, we know the numbers. We know that the Black and Brown community bears the brunt of helping to integrate the schools, and they also have to travel further than any other demographic in Evanston. So we need to fix this inequity. In terms of the vision is to open a public school located in Evanston Central Core, where children excel via deep engagement in STEM principles, science, technology, engineering, and math. And they work together with the community and help to ensure high family involvement. Why is school? Like I said before, it's helping to reverse the inequity. We also want to make it easier for parents to participate in their children's experience. We want to help raise self-esteem of the students. We want to help, excuse me, we want to help build parent networks to improve after-school program access. We want to make it attractive to live in the Central Core. And lastly, we want to help improve the community's integrity. In terms of the community's integrity, a study was done by the Evanston Human Relations Commission that found that when the school had left, the community's integrity had decreased. So this is something that is important to address as well. Why STEM? STEM, there's a high demand for STEM careers. There's about 1 million job opportunities out there. They're looking for folks that have backgrounds in STEM careers and STEM studies. There's also a shortfall in STEM performance. So if you look at the United States, they lag behind other developed nations when it comes to math and science. The other thing that's attractive about STEM is it offers application versatility. So you don't necessarily have to major in a STEM field to be excited about learning. Kids that go through STEM programming are excited about learning. They're excited about going to school. And so we feel like this is a good foundation no matter what career path you choose. The school type, the thought is for it to be a community school. This involves thinking about partnering with other organizations such as the YMCA or Family Focus or Northwestern, or even the library, where they would provide programming before school, after school, and on weekends. We think that this is good for the whole child, you know, not just learning from 9 to 3, but also learning before school and after school. Why the Central Core? Well, one of the things that people don't realize is the diversity. If you look at the 2010 Census Bureau, Blacks make up 41.5%, whites make up 35.3%, Hispanic Latinx make up 14.4%, and Asians make up 8.8%. The next Census Bureau will probably show the African-American Black population decreasing. Despite that, the Central Core will still have one of the highest concentrations of Blacks across Evanston. The Central Core has the ward with the most amount of District 65 kids. It's centrally located in Evanston, and they've gone 50 years without a school. In terms of the pursuit, like I said, this pursuit started about 3.5 years ago, and it was really started with thinking about a vision. And so we met with different stakeholders across Evanston to get feedback and to really sharpen our pencil around what is the vision for, a school in the Central Core. We built awareness. We did presentations with the unions for District 65, with 202. We did presentations with the NAACP, Evanston Own It. We went out and gathered emails and names of folks that were interested in our pursuit. We were at the community festivals, and we gathered about 400 emails over that time. We have an online presence. We have a website called stemschoolevanston.net. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Actually, Merge students actually manage our Twitter account, so look out for posts by them. We are in the middle of a feasibility study. Excuse me. And I'll talk about what that's all about in a second. We also are trying to do community research. We are an official 501c3, so folks actually can donate and receive a tax benefit. In terms of the feasibility study, so there's several goals of the feasibility study. The first one is to identify a potential location for the school. We're centrally located within a walking distance of the central core, within a half a mile to 3/4 of a mile. We wanted to include community services. I mentioned, the YMCA, YOU could be another partner, the library. Karen could talk about that in a second. We also wanted to open the school without a tax referendum, without increasing taxes. We also wanted to be the least cost option to District 65. We wanted to avoid opening the school and causing another school to close. The other component is we think that it should be a kindergarten through 8th grade school. The cost for doing this study, we, like I said, received 2 grants from Evanston Community Foundation totaling about $50,000. We're still short probably about another $40,000. So we're looking for funding to help complete the feasibility study. In terms of our community research, we would really want to hear from the residents within the community. We want to understand, what does the community think about the educational inequity? We want to use quantitative and qualitative research methods to ensure an optimized participation. We want to hear our residents envision educational redress that leads to meaningful solutions. We will gather all this information and feed it to District 65 Student Assignment Planning Committee, as well as other groups that are looking to address educational inequities and educational redress. In terms of the value for opening this STEM community school, we think it will help to improve the equity across all of Evanston. It will help to improve the community's integrity. It will help improve family engagement and help improve children's self-esteem. Some of the things that this school could also do that are quantifiable is it could help improve the number of college graduates, help improve personal earnings of individuals, and help improve test scores, thus reducing the opportunity gap. With that, I will now open the floor to any questions that audience may have.
I see one question in the chat asking to expand on the idea of community integrity.
Right. So this is feeling good about where you live, right? This is about pride. And, like I said, a study was done by the Human Relations Commission that saw input from residents that lived in the 5th Ward to understand how they felt and what the impact was with Foster School closing. And so they identified this Foster School closing as a negative impact on, how folks felt about, where they lived.
So there are a few questions here too. They're all popping up now. So one is asking Henry if you are a 5th Ward resident, and the second is asking if school-age kids how many school-age kids live currently in the 5th Ward?
Yeah, so based off of no, I do not live in the 5th Ward. So this is really about just like a caring parent, a parent that saw an inequity and feeling like there's something that I could do as an individual using my talents and passion and vision to help, fix an issue. Some of the team members that are part of STEM School Evanston are 5th Ward residents. So we're constantly leaning on their shoulders and, getting input. I have advisors that are 5th Ward residents. So, even though, I helped found STEM School Evanston, it's really not about me. It's really about the community and those folks. The second question, which was, can't recall. The second part of that question about, I know it was about, do I live in the fifth ward, and was the other part? Oh, the number of kids. Sarita probably knows better, but I think I heard 700 kids.
Yeah, it's not that far off. It's hard to quantify because again, they're going to every school and we're busing them, and the bus numbers aren't necessarily about seats, but about routes. So I've heard, yeah, between the 500-700 number as well.
There's a question in the chat asking how this fits in with Brown versus Board of Education.
Yeah, I was looking at it. I was actually thinking a little bit about it because I've also heard narratives about, like, if you open the fifth ward school and like all the Black and brown kids in Evanston go to one school. Well, that's not true because Black and brown kids live throughout Evanston. There's just higher concentrations in certain wards. And I think, as Henry already pointed out, the fifth ward is quite diverse, way more diverse now than it has ever been. So I'm not sure that it necessarily goes against Brown versus Board of Education more than supports that effort.
Okay, let's do one more question. There's so many questions in this Q&A, but we will cover them once Karen is done. But one more question. So someone is asking, what is the relationship between STEM School, Evanston, and D65? Are you proposing a public charter model?
No, it's intended to be a D65 school. That was, what we wanted from day one since this movement started. Over time, we did explore other options, private, everything. We looked at everything, to be honest and frank. And then I would say over the last 1 or 2 years, the belief that it could be a D65 school became more possible with the hiring of Dr. Horton. And also you have a board that is, strongly in favor of opening the school. It's almost kind of like all the stars are lining up for us in terms of the support for this being a D65 school.
Yeah, and thanks for the question about the relationship. So, Henry's been doing this work for 3 years at this point. And so when the district decided that we were going to kind of step our game up in this effort and really think about a full student assignment plan, it was, a no-brainer to obviously have Henry be a part of this work and allow him to continue like with this kind of hyper focus on the fifth ward, because we have to think about every school in Evanston and not just the fifth ward and everything around student assignments. And we really hope, with data, that a lot of the efforts that Henry and his team has already developed, like we can get data to support that. Unfortunately, if every fifth ward parent is like, we don't want STEM, like we're back at the drawing board. And Henry is good with that. He knows that we support him 100%, but if we hear something different, it's really gonna be about the community effort. But I can't imagine that there's a lot of people who don't want, something that's going to obviously support them in the future. What that looks like, where it is, how it rolls out, it will really, really be based on how our community responds to this survey. It will be based on the master facility plan and data that we have. So I think someone else asked also, are we considering just everything becoming local area schools? Not necessarily. We want to make sure that people have a local area school. And so it's very obvious and apparent that there are some areas that just don't have one, obviously the fifth ward. So we want to make sure that that's a possibility. Frankly, everything's on the table. Like what kind of schools, how many do we do? K2, 3, 5, 6, 8? Do we do all K8? Everything is on the table for the student assignment committee. We're truly looking at just everything and how it's going to best move us forward.
So I see a lot of questions in the chat. Do you want me to go through those through the Q&A, Izzy, or do you want
to? Not yet. We will save that for then.
Yep.
We're going to introduce Karen.
All right, thank you so much, Sarita and Henry, for taking those questions. The last panelist we have with us tonight is Karen Lyons, who is the Executive Director of the Evanston Public Library. Would you like to introduce yourself and get started?
Yes, thank you, Alice. Thank you, Emerge students, for bringing us together and for continuing this important work in this conversation. It's a pleasure to be with Sarita and Henry tonight, and I too learned so much listening to the panel last week. Evanston Public Library is not your traditional passive library waiting for you to come in quietly to ask us a question or ask for a book. I mean, we want to answer your questions. We love to give you books. We celebrate reading, but we really view our work as a community builder and a community support center and a way to engage and support our families and our partners. But we're also viewing our work very intentionally with great focus around equity and racial equity. And so in a few moments, I'm going to show you some examples of successful co-location of libraries, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But how the Evanston Public Library supports students of all ages, early learning, our middle schoolers, teens, our adults, our senior citizens, and how we have the opportunity at libraries to wrap around the school day. So we can see students, as Henry has said, we can see our students and help them in the morning, before school, after school, on the weekends. We can spend a lot of time supporting our students in their learning. And it's a different environment. I mean, you come to the library to have fun and explore your curiosity and do your research and talk to staff, and have fun and experiment with learning approaches that support what you're learning in school, but are not the same. And so we do a lot of work and have done a lot of work for years around STEM and STEAM. And our focus is outward, turning outward into the community, listening and co-creating our work with our community. But also one of my goals has always been 25% of our programs and services outside the walls. We're not defined by our walls or our address. We're going where our families are and finding ways to enjoy learning and share the resources of the library in a way that's convenient and accessible with very busy schedules and very busy families. You may not always have time to come to the library, but we're happy for you to come when you do. This summer, you will see our engagement work outside the library, as we always are, but especially in the 5th, 8th, and 9th wards, with hundreds of programs over the next 11 weeks out there having fun in parks, at schools. You'll see us all over the place, and we invite you to come and have fun with us. We're also launching, there'll be a lot of opportunities for surveys and conversations. Sarita was talking about how the district is gathering data. I know Henry continues and is really careful in working with community and residents. And so our strategic planning is outwardly focused. There will be opportunities for you to share your thoughts with us, to meet in focus groups, to meet in larger groups, to finish community surveys, so that you really are co-creating with us your Evanston Library for now and for in the future. And this co-creation is such an important part of informing our design for a library in the 5th Ward. This is something that we've been talking about and working towards for years, working with Henry and exploring the possibilities of what could be within Evanston Public Library in the school. Certainly an Evanston Public Library in that area is something that we're going to explore a little bit tonight now. And I want you to see what's happened in other places and begin to let your imagination explore what this could be, how much more we could do in terms of serving our 5th Ward residents, and how by partnering together and co-locating, we just naturally will help and support each other in a way that I think just makes sense, and it's pretty amazing. So let's see how we do this. Okay, can you see that? Okay. So co-locating library branches is something that is back in fashion now, and for some really logical reasons, but there's a power to it. And so wait a minute, now I've just, do you still see my screen? You do, okay. So for those of you that have not had the opportunity to visit the Robert Crown Community Center, we've co-located a library branch there in Main and Dodge. And so this is a rendering. If you were standing on the corner looking at the facility, we're on the first floor towards the right. And over here is where the preschool is, and then we've got the athletic facility up and around here. When you co-locate a library in any facility, the adjacencies are important, and the ways that you can leverage the other spaces in the facility are important. So we are actually partially below the gymnasium on the second floor. So if you're in the gym, you can look down into the library. But on the first floor, here's our library. This is a reading garden, and it's a great space, and I hope you come enjoy the reading garden, and we're going to be doing a lot more programming and having fun out there. But notice how, so you come into the facility and your rinks are on the right side, but you can immediately see the library. We have glass walls. And so we're near this preschool. The preschool can come and visit us, and we can bring programs over there. And the way this library is designed is for us to be able to be very flexible and push out and pull in. So here on the left, you see happy people in the reading garden. And here's the lobby. These are sliding glass doors. So we can then push book shelves out into the library. We've got seating out there, but you can come in, we can move things around. Over here, there's someone very carefully studying on a laptop. Here's like a tech bar of computers over here. This area over here is defined as our children's area. And then there's study rooms around the corner, 3 individual study rooms that right now 1 or 2 people will be able to use, up to 6 people later will be able to use when COVID restrictions are lifted. So here you're coming into the facility, into Robert Crown, and here's your library right over here with the doors open. This is a multi-purpose room, and so we can have classes, we can have pop-up computer classes in there, but we can open the doors and have a speaker here and have rows of people involved with the speaker listening and enjoying programs and going out into the reading garden. And down this hallway are more multi-purpose rooms. So we've got 6,000 square feet within our glass walls. And part of the way we could do that is because we share the programming and the space with the multi-purpose rooms outside of our library walls to add to our program space. So those were kind of renderings, and here's some during construction photos for you to see. So here's the gymnasium up here. You can see the rows of books and materials. Where this person is busy shelving, these are where the study rooms are. This area here is an oval area with some really cushy seating and a real soft, cushy floor, so kids can get books and sit down and enjoy themselves. And then again, you can see where we can push out into the lobby, and these bookshelves are all on wheels, so we can move them around and push them out if we need to reconfigure the space. So that's our version of co-location in Evanston. And this co-locating a public library in an athletic or a community facility is new to this country. It's been done in Canada a few times, but new in terms of what the US is doing. Our neighbors to the south, Chicago Public Library, have recently co-located some of their branches in 3 different combinations. And so I just wanted to show you what they've been doing and how some of these adjacencies can be sorted out. And they've partnered in this work with the Chicago Housing Authority in some of these. But the first one is something similar to what we're talking about with Henry. So this is a Chicago Public Library located in the back of the yard school. And so when you're locating a library in a school, you have to be, a deep partnership and careful conversations and consideration about the adjacencies and the different missions. I mean, we share a mission to educate our children and support our children, but the library doesn't sit in loco parentis. We allow the public of all ages to come in, but as parents and as educators, there's a concern with, as there should be, keeping the students safe, keeping track of everybody, and not having members of the public wandering around the schools. And so what you do, you control that through access points and through the design and how you can be flexible, but also at different parts of the day, be very clear about how you control, how you welcome in, and how you limit that access. Now here in the back of the yards library, as part of that school, they have a few zones that are built. So you'll see that they've got those flexible bookshelves that can be moving around. They've got some multi-purpose and drop-in space. They've got their computers as part of this design. And so they're within the school, but there's control and limit of access, but easy access for the students. So that's their version of a library in a school. Chicago's also done some interesting combinations with housing, especially with senior housing up above, and then common space, and then a branch library. So this is the Northtown branch with a combination of housing and library space. And then finally, I wanted to share an example of a library and an early learning center. And so this is the new Elfgail branch library that just reopened recently, I think this last month. It replaces another public library, Chicago Public Library, in a school. What it replaced was, picture an L-shaped building. And so one arm of the L, the letter L was, capital L was the library, and there was a common inner door that was secured. And then the school students and the classes were in the other arm so that they could come in, enjoy the library, but there was an exterior entrance to the public space, and there was that level of control. But now this combination now at Elfgail is an early learning and a library. So take a look at this. Here in this red space to the right, that's your library. And then this green, here's an entrance. So here's your vestibule. This green is the common area. And there's a music activity room and arts and crafts. And here's the lobby. There's a community courtyard to enjoy. And then here on the left, the blue is your child care center. And so once again, much like we have a combination of the preschool near the branch at our Robert Crown Community Center and Library, here in this new Elfgail branch, you've got your public library, and there's computers and study space and learning space. There's a U Media for creation for teens and middle school. And then here's all your early learning for a variety of ages. And so here's some renderings that kind of give you an idea of what the Elfgail library part of the branch, the building looks like, with comfy seating and some meeting rooms and some books and a center service desk. And so these are just some things to consider as we talk about co-location, no matter where we are. It's the benefits, how we can leverage the best use of resources, invite some design to help us with our challenges, but also help support each other's mission, making sure that all the systems and the logistics really and the financing work before it's opened. And then just really having some terrific collaborative partners, which I know we do with Henry, and some good teams to think about and anticipate where the sources of friction or irritation, as well as where the opportunities to really leverage what we're doing together in order to make the best use of the space before, during, and after school, and how the library can support that mission. So we're so excited to be part of this conversation with Henry, with District 65, and with all of you, and imagine what's possible. So thank you. Now let me see if I can stop sharing. Or not.
All right, thank you, Karen, for sharing. But now we'd like to open up the floor to the questions, and we'll start off with a few that our Emerge group asked. And our first question is, in your day-to-day life in District 65, how do you see the effects of there not being a school in the 5th Ward on the kids who live there?
Is this open to anybody? So like I mentioned before, I don't live in the 5th Ward, but one of the things that I've heard from individuals that do is they visually see a diversion happening every single day they go to school. So so kids that have a school in their community, they're able to walk to school, you know, their parents can drop them off, you know, a couple minutes, you know, before the school bell rings on their way to work. The kids from 5th Ward, they're waking up earlier in the morning. They're standing at the bus stop, you know, in rain, in snow, 20-degree weather, 10 below degree weather, and they're getting to school. Some of them are tired. I mean, they're just tired. You know, the bus driver could drop them off late. Teachers are irritated because the kids are late to school. At the end of the day, the kids that live in the neighborhood actually go to the back of the school to play on the playground with other children in their neighborhood. The kids from the 5th Ward actually have to board the bus in the front of the school and go back to their community. And they're, you know, back home, you know, sometimes 45 minutes to an hour after school is over. So they're spending a disproportionate amount of time, you know, versus all other kids on the bus, you know, for their day. And they have to go through a lot. And so those are just some of the visuals and the stories that we hear from folks. The other thing that is evident too is because the community is divided up, it's difficult for parents to connect. I mentioned this before. So in the 5th Ward, you can live on a block, you know, one of your neighbors goes to Kingsley, the other neighbor goes to Orrington, another one goes to Willard. You can go to like 4 or 5 different schools on the same block. So when it comes to, you know, parents saying, hey, you know, how's your school day? Oh, did you hear about that project? Oh, you know, they're all on different schedules, different project, you know, assignments, different itineraries. So it's the reality for that community, unfortunately.
And I mean, I grew up in the 5th Ward and lived there the bulk of my life. And I think what was really apparent was that we had to create that sense of community, where in other words, it was natural, right? Like the school hub is just a natural community space. And so when you don't have it, or when a ward is void of it, you are then putting that onus on the backs of the people that live there and pay taxes just like everybody else in Evanston. And so family focus, Fleetwood, that is our hub. That is what we created. That park, those grounds is kind of where the fifth ward then came as a community to say like, well, we'll just take this then, right? And that's, again, I continue to ask, like, where are our values and what does that say about, what we honor in this town?
Yeah, thank you so much to both of you for those insightful responses. The next question that we have is what does an equitable, inclusive education system look like to you? And what does that vision look like in the context of Evanston? And feel free to be imaginative, and anybody here can respond.
I'd like to hear what it means to some of you guys. Like, I mean, I feel like Henry and I are like knee deep in this work, but as like young people leading this, I'd love to hear what you guys think about that.
Yeah, does anybody have any thoughts on that? If not, I can share a little bit myself.
Go ahead, Anna, then we'll catch up.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it all comes back to what you were talking about, Sarita, about how do we build community and how do we support the needs of the community. And I think that the education system and schools are a really great way to not only support the academic needs in the community, but all the different needs of the community. And so how can we create a school community that not only addresses these academic needs, but also supports the community in all these different ways, whether it be food, whether it be creating a housing system within a school or within a library, all these big imaginative ideas of how can we support the needs of the community and also reduce educational disparities at the same time are some things that I'm excited about. So I don't know if anybody wants to add on to that.
Yeah, so my thought process is about, the educational opportunities, just kind of thinking about my own personal experience at the high school. I have noticed that my AP classes are mostly white students. And that's a big problem that, the school is attempting to work on. And there's a lot of students trying to work towards a goal of a more diverse a more diverse AP student classes, because there's so many students who feel discouraged from taking those classes because they've had a really rough time with school their whole life. And there are so many students of color behind because of the lack of opportunities. So I think what it would look like for me is equal educational opportunities throughout their entire school career, and especially starting from a really young age so that they can get a really, really strong start that will support them throughout their entire career. You're muted, Sarita.
Just give you my whole story over here. I worked at the Y for 20 years, and something I think we did really well during my time there was really think about filling the gaps in the community. So when I think of, what an equitable school education system looks like, it isn't, to Anna's point, just about the education piece, but like, where are the gaps? So yeah, books and breakfast, 100% love them, super great, fill in the gap. Is there not a library there? How do we get that there? Is there challenges with, if the city of Evanston needs a hub there to talk about, housing instabilities, if we need to think about how to get childcare at schools, right? Like, so childcare is a big gap in this community. There, every child care center has waiting lists in our community. So another gap, how do we get that connect? That's an easy connection to schools, right? Is there an opportunity to have childcare or daycares at schools now instead of just these kind of random hubs around Evanston? So I automatically think about how do you fill the gap piece? 9 to 5 isn't a traditional workday anymore. What does it look like to have school open till 6 or 7 o'clock? Maybe not in the traditional sense, but again, to kind of support the family needs and the community needs as they arise.
If no one has anything else to say, I think I will start reading questions from the Q&A section. So Henry, there are a couple questions that kind of go together. One is, have Fifth Ward residents supported the mission of the Fifth Ward? And then could you talk more about the referendum effort from a few years ago?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So Fifth Ward residents have supported a school. If you look back at the 2012 referendum, 67% of the voters said yes to increasing their taxes to open the school. The referendum also passed in the 2nd Ward, which is right next to the 5th Ward, and also passed in the 8th Ward. If you look at the demographics of those wards, there's a decent people of color representation. The wards or the areas of Evanston where the referendum took a beating was in the north part of Evanston, the 6th and 7th wards. Some of the arguments that were made by some of those residents included, hey, I don't want my taxes to go up for the benefit of another group. Like, what's in it for me, right? That was one argument. Another argument was just general taxes going up. People just don't want to pay more in taxes. The third argument, which is quite interesting, was the case made that, hey, if you open this school in the 5th Ward, you're going to take away all the Black kids that are helping to diversify my school, and you're going to send them to this school. Therefore, my diversity is going to decrease. I moved to Evanston because I wanted this great diversity. Now you're going to take it away. I mean, this is some of the feedback that, I was hearing from folks. I mean, even Mayor Haggerty, when I met with him when he was a mayor back then, told me about these stories about parents complaining to him about, hey, man, did you hear? So that's the reality. I mean, I think in 2021, it's different now. I think there's definitely a recognition that it's unfair to expect the diversity burden to fall on the Black and brown children, because that's basically what's been happening for 40, 50 years. So, I mean, that's what I know about the referendum. I've been in Evanston for, 15 years before I heard about, again, I didn't even know about some of this stuff. So this has all been, learning for me. I'm not a long time Evanstonian. I don't have 3-5 year generations of folks that live here. So, this is all hearing, these are testimonies directly from residents, some people that were part of the movement. And we are very intentional with reaching out to the folks that are part of the referendum movement. There was a CB4 group with Gio Logan, Jerome Summers, Oliver Ruff, Kirby Callum, Bruce King. I mean, a lot of folks, and I've talked to them all and heard from them all. So, like Sarita said, we're standing on the shoulders of some folks that were a part of this, and we're carrying a baton, and we hope to cross the finish line successfully.
As sort of a follow-up question, could you talk about why you plan on avoiding a referendum on the 5th Ward school? What is going to be the legal basis for the funding for the construction?
Yeah, so we have a feasibility study underway right now. The plan is essentially for us to privately fund the building itself with the expectation that District 65 operates the school. This is, our proposal or our thinking right now from a STEM School Evanston perspective. I'm a part of the Student Assignment Committee. They might have a different vision. They might have a different, plan for, how they think they can fiscally responsibly open a school in the 5th Ward. They might have a different, vision. Our plan is to, again, privately fund it, take the burden off of District 65. They would essentially operate the school. They have this model. I mean, District 65 has buildings that they, lease. And, we think that this model is in the best interest of all parties.
Yeah, I think it's really, we have like this unique opportunity where Henry's kind of taken a real deep dive into like a specific school in the Fifth Ward. And I know that our team and I think I answered someone's question on there as well, like our financial team and Dr. Horton, the superintendent, is also thinking about what that model looks like. So what I think that gives us is a kind of diverse financial palette to look at, right? So it's not just like this one entity that says, this is how it goes. We have kind of ours, and then we can look at Henry's. And so we have some options. Who knows, like Henry said, what's going to come out of our student assignment advisory committee. There's some really thoughtful leaders on that committee as well. So we may come up with 3 different options on what this looks like. Then we have the master facility plan, who could also give us some information. So we'll be able to really provide like kind of a diverse palette for us to look at the financial support for this school and the district-wide student assignment plan.
Great, thank you so much for that response. I see another question in the Q&A section of why do you favor a K-8 model? I don't know if one of you two wanted to talk that through.
I can share my, and Sarita, you want to kick it off, or I can?
Yeah, so again, like I think on the student assignment end, it's really going to depend on, again, the feedback, the survey. I do think that there is some support for K-8, just knowing that the 3 just core middle schools that we have, are pretty hefty, have pretty hefty numbers. So it would be nice to take a little bit of the burden off of one of those schools. The K-8 model, we have models that work already, like at King Arts and Rose. So, it's not going to be a new model for District 65. But again, we're not, all the models at this point are on the table. And then I'll let Henry talk about why specifically for this school.
Yeah, so for the STEM school, Evanston, we think it should be kindergarten through 8th grade with a priority placed on students and families that live in the 5th Ward. So the intent is, just to not just have a school, right? And opportunity hoarding comes in and folks, are displacing family members in the 5th Ward, and you don't serve the families that you intended to serve. And so we think actually a magnet model helps with that. There's actually gentrification going on. My personal belief is that the gentrification could be sped up if you make it a neighborhood school. So the thinking is that it's similar to King Arts Lab, where you prioritize seats for 5th Ward families, say it's 50, 60%, whatever that number is, to make sure that families that want to send their kids to this school have an opportunity to. We do recognize there's folks that are in the 5th Ward that are fine continuing to be bused. They have relationships with folks, at the schools they're at. They're close to graduating. I was talking to an individual that did some surveys back in 2012, and they found, there's a third of the residents that weren't in favor of a 5th Ward school being in the neighborhood. So we know that there's some folks that aren't going to want it. And, but, our intent is to serve the folks that do want it. So that's the thinking around the magnet school model. With the magnet school model, the school is open longer, so you can incorporate more of the STEM concepts. You have more flexibility around, doing some culturally responsive pedagogy, call it, ACC, and, is what's in Oakton today. So we think there's more flexibility in the curriculum. I'm not an educator. I'll let those folks, tell you more about, how a magnet school model could make it easier for some of the things they would want to do with the curriculum.
Thank you so much for that. And just as a reminder, everyone feel free to keep on putting questions in the Q&A section or in the chat. We would love to see them. I see another question that says, are there existing STEM schools of the type that you envision? Have any of them operated long enough to see the long-term results of that type of school compared to a regular school?
Yeah, so back in my hometown, there's a STEM school. It's a public school called Marshall. I actually went to visit it. They actually used to be a neighborhood school, and the superintendent of Toledo Public Schools said, hey, we need to really improve the academic outcomes of our students in this particular area of Toledo. I mean, it's a low income area, I'll just say, predominantly Black and brown students. And they moved to a STEM school model, and they actually did see improvements in the children's outcomes. They're actually partnered with it's actually a building that's right next door to the Boys and Girls Club. So at the end of the school day, before school, the kids can, have programming before school. They got programming after school. So that's a model. I mean, that school was converted to a STEM school, I would say, within the last 4 or 5 years. If you're looking for long-term, 20, 30 years, I have to do some research to answer that question.
I see another question in the chat that says, have you explored additional school models such as STEAM or STREAM?
So I'll tell you the story about how STEM was chosen, selected. We actually support the arts, to make it STEAM. The thinking is that King Arts Lab is a arts focused school. So the thought was they kind of own the A, if you will. And so we thought that we needed to offer something that the school district doesn't have, which is the STEM. We do believe, though, that art should be a part of the school curriculum, and we definitely support it. I'm not an educator, so hopefully the educators will figure out how to incorporate the A. But we definitely are big proponents of STEAM. And I think I heard another acronym I hadn't heard before. What was the other one?
STREAM.
STREAM. Yeah. Oh, all right. R.
Yeah.
I don't know the R. I don't know what the R is.
Racial equity? No, I have no idea. I'm guessing. I just want to shout out Dolores Holmes is on this call, one of the giants that we stand behind. Thank you, Dolores. I'm reading your comments. I just want to shout you out.
Yes.
I see a couple questions in the Q&A section asking how can people individually get involved in the STEM school mission? I don't know if Henry, you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, so we have a few committees that are underway. So we have kind of our core parent group that kind of kickstarted this whole movement of a STEM community school. We actually just started a planning committee that's taking the feasibility study and figuring out how to build support across the community. We're also in the process of creating a campaign cabinet of folks that would help to fundraise for some of the foundational work that I mentioned before, for the feasibility study, for the community research, before kind of going into kind of capital campaign fundraising mode. You can go to the website if you're interested in either participating or being added to the newsletter or even financially contributing. The website address is www.stemschoolevanston.net.
Nicole said the R stands for reading.
I saw that. Yes. Nice. All right. Yeah. If you don't have a school that teaches kids how to read, you're not a school. So I agree with you, Nicole. Yeah. We need a string. Yeah. It needs to have the R.
I see one more question in the Q&A section, essentially asking about diversity. And is diversity going to be a goal of the STEM school? And if so, how will that be achieved?
Yeah, so if you apply the percentage split now, so again, I shared with you the numbers for the 2010 Census Bureau. Let me just pull it up. So 41.5% of the population is Black, right, in 2010. And that number will probably decrease. The Hispanic Latinx was sitting at 14.4 back in 2010. That percentage will probably increase for the next Census Bureau. The white other is at 35.3. I mentioned gentrification. That number will probably increase. If you take the current percentages as is, this school will be very diverse. Mm-hmm. The other belief is, with this approach of, guaranteeing 50, 60% of the slots being Fifth Ward residents, if you assume that same percentage split of diversity holds, it will naturally be diverse, right? And so, the thinking is that you make it open to everyone outside the Fifth Ward. Outside the Fifth Ward, the numbers are different.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions kind of plaguing our committee is, obviously K-8 model, does that make sense? Is it a magnet? Does that make sense? Or is it a neighborhood school, right? And so again, this isn't really about if we're going to get a fifth ward, it's like the how and what makes sense. So that's something, again, the surveys that I keep talking about for the families, there are a lot of questions in there about like desirable school models and what kind of school would you like? What does it make sense that it's a neighborhood school? There's definitely some people standing on a hill about this needs to just be a neighborhood school. Then we have everybody on the other hill saying like, it makes sense for me to magnet. And so I think what we have at our disposal, and particularly at the district, is policy, right? So whatever we make this school, we can create policy behind it to make sure that we have achieved the equity that we are desiring for this, and specifically, making sure the unintended consequence isn't that that whole neighborhood gets gentrified and we open a school and is not for the people who actually have the suffering. And so we really want to be intentional about that and what that looks like. So whatever model we come up with, there's definitely going to be some policy pieces behind that to support making sure as we move forward that we don't kind of sway away from all the work that we've done.
Yeah, thank you so much for that thoughtful response. I see another question in the Q&A section that asks, what steps is the district taking to ensure that the growing Latinx community, the Fifth Ward, has seats at the table and a full voice in envisioning the new school and the implications for emergent bilinguals, tweet, etc.?
Yeah, so I think I pointed out in my presentation, like that our department that supports that in general is expanding services. So that's one piece of that, to making sure that like students that are emergent bilingual have supports at their local area schools, and not some and not most, but the goal is all, right, by 2024. So that's one piece. We do have a decent amount of Latinx parents and community members on our team, on the student assignment advisory team. So we're going to make sure, obviously, that their voices are lifted and it's heard, because that population is growing rapidly in Evanston, and it has been for a while. So we know that that's going to be a core consideration. And we know that they are, growing rapidly, particularly in the Fifth Ward. So I think, as Henry kind of pointed out those stats, we know that they need to have a large voice at the table. And anyone who knows any work that I've done, I always put the people at the table that it's going to impact first.
Yeah, I love that, talking about having the people at the table be the ones impacted by that. Thank you so much for that. I see another question in the chat asking, I've heard there is consideration of a school for the Fifth Ward that isn't located in the Fifth Ward. Is that true?
I just have to keep reiterating, like, everything is on the table. The goal is to have a school in the Fifth Ward, yes. If, again, this master facility plan is going to be pretty huge for us, and we'll see what kind of emerges from that. I can't imagine our committee is going to say, let's open a school for the Fifth Ward and put it, by Evanston Hospital. Like, I just don't think that that's going to be the route that we take. Again, I can't stress enough, the survey. A lot of the data we're going to use is going to come from there. The goal is to have the school in the Fifth Ward, though.
Yeah, we support that thought. So our feasibility study actually ensures that it is in the Fifth Ward. So some of the location options that have been explored thus far are all, in the central core within walking distance. We took into account the fact that, you could be, less than a half a mile apart, but, you have to cross over a major street to get to school. And so, that was taken into consideration for this feasibility study, was to making sure that, it's in walking distance from the central core, and that it is in the Fifth Ward. We do have some leading candidates of location options, and they're all in the Fifth Ward. So just know that.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. And I see one last question. We'll take one last question before wrapping up. It is, if there are unintended consequences, like there were with the original decision to close Foster School, how easy will it be for the district to change the type of school placed in the Fifth Ward? That's
a really great question. I think I've been thinking of unintended consequences a lot in this project. And so I feel like, I think Henry pointed out earlier, like, we have a really a strong board that's behind this right now. And it's going to be really important, I think, to vote to keep boards around that's going to be supportive of this mission, because policy is where it is, right? Like I love, our efforts on the groundwork, but the policy is what drives this. So if we determine, again, in our plan, the part of that big question is, and how do we create a plan that we review every 5 years? That is where that comes from. We want to make sure that even if we slam dunk this, I'm gonna say Jordan because I'm a 90s kid, get a buzzer ringer on Jordan on this, and in 5 years it's not right, we have an opportunity to say like, hey, we are going to review this every year, but in 5 years, it's time to really take the deep dive, and then we keep reviewing. So I really think we just have to, on the policy end, make sure that there are kind of those checks and balances. And everyone at the district knows I'm very, very policy driven. First thing I learned when I got here were all the policies of the student assignment plan. So making sure that we encourage ourselves to like push those policies together and have the review system will ultimately kind of help us shift and change as needed.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all the questions. Those were excellent. So thank you for engaging in this dialogue with us. And I think we're going to wrap up now.
Yes, so thank you all for attending. We're going to give it back to the public library.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening to this presentation and all of the questions that were asked and the comments, especially by the Emerge students. I really want to give a big shout out to our 6 Emerge students from Evanston Township High School. We really appreciate you participating in tonight's program and moderating our Q&A. And I also would like to give a warm thanks to Sarita, Henry, and Karen for your presentations. For the attendees' information, I will be sending out a link to the recording of tonight's presentation to everyone who registered. And in that email, I will include information on how to learn more about STEM School Evanston, how to participate in the survey and look for those focus groups that Sarita mentioned in her presentation. And we'll have information from the library on upcoming strategic planning and community input. So please, on Monday, look for an email from me with information on how to connect to all 3 of the institutions that presented tonight. Again, thank you so much for attending, and thank you to our presenters and our moderators. Have a great night.
Thank you.
All right, good night.
Thank you, everyone.